Hi, I'm Teng Bu from Capital Dynamics. For those of you who have been watching our sessions uh, regularly, you would know who I am, what Capital Dynamics is. But recently, we've got a number of new subscribers and who may not be familiar with myself or Capital Dynamics. We are Asia's first global fund manager. We invest globally and we have offices in Shanghai, Hong Kong, KL, Singapore and Sydney. And as a fund manager, we are licensed in Australia, Singapore, Malaysia, Hong Kong and so on. So our main business activity is fund management, but in the course of our research, we do all types of research. We do economic research of many countries. We do research of companies, basically those listed on many stock exchanges. We also do research across different areas, political, historical, cultural, and so on. So in the course of our research, we come across interesting findings, interesting conclusions that we have shared with you in the past and that we'll be sharing with you in the future. So for those of you who are interested in not just a commentator on what stock to buy, whether the market is going up, whether the economy is entering recession, and you want something a lot more holistic, a lot more integrated, then subscribe to our channel because if you go through our past sessions, you'll see that the range of topics that we have touched upon, that I've talked about, has been very wide-ranging: political, social, economics, investing, stock markets, and so on. Right? If you love that kind of talks delivered in an objective, independent, fact-based manner, please subscribe or share with your friends and other people. So for today, if you notice, our title is 2024 is election year. I'm not talking about Malaysia's election, no, we're already done with that. I'm not talking about Singapore's election, no. I'm talking about globally, because strangely 2024 is going to see many countries having their elections. In fact, 7 of the world's most populous countries will have elections in 2024, starting with Bangladesh, India, United States, Indonesia, Pakistan, Russia, Mexico. So that is the 7 most populous countries in the world, but the list goes on. UK is supposed to have it in 2025, but looking at the way the current government, ruling government in UK is mismanaging the country, most likely the general election will be held in 2024. So out of these many elections in 2024, there are a few that are extremely important to investors, to businessmen, right? Out of the many, I have zoomed in on 2. One is Indonesia, which is very soon. The presidential election will be next month. And the next one that will have a big impact on many of us would be the presidential election of United States, which will be towards the end of this year, right? And what I'm going to go through is, what do you as an investor, particularly if you invest in the stock market, what do you do in a year where there could possibly be tremendous changes, there could possibly be many uncertainties, right? Especially Indonesia is the largest economy in ASEAN, United States being the largest economy in the world. So whoever is the winner, whoever run the country, is going to have major impact, especially if they have major changes in their foreign policies. So let's look at Indonesia's presidential election, which is next month. If you can see from the photo, the three main candidates, Anies, Prabowo, and Ganja. I mean, at the moment, if you read the newspapers and the press reporting, the candidate that's leading is Prabowo, and his vice presidential candidate is Gibran, who is the elder son of Jokowi, and then you have Anies, and then you have Ganja, right? So if there's a decisive victory in the middle of February, then that's it. But if the first round does not produce a clear-cut winner, then there's a second round in middle of 2024. Right? So let's not think too far ahead. Let's look at the next important election in 2024, which will be United States. If you observe, if you are following what is happening in US now, on the Republican side, DeSantis has really dropped out. The other candidate, the Indian candidate, Ramaswamy, has also dropped out. So you're left with only Donald Trump and Nikki Haley, right? And it looks like, on the Republican side, it looks like Trump is going to be the presidential candidate again. Nikki Haley is nowhere near she doesn't enjoy the support anywhere near what Trump is enjoying. And for the actual election it's most likely between Biden and Trump, because on the Democrat side there's no real contender as well. So if it's going to be Trump and Biden, if Biden wins, then I guess you will see more or less of the same policies. Yeah. If Trump wins, he's going to be president for the second time. That is going to be a major source of a lot of uncertainties. Some articles have already said that if Trump wins in 2024, his victory would embolden Russia, because Trump and Putin supposedly close friends. I mean, Trump was very friendly with Putin when he was president, and then Trump's victory could also embolden China, and then Trump's victory could also embolden Israel. Trump was, when he was president for the first time, was very pro-Israel. He wanted to shift the US embassy and so on and so on. So what would the implications be if Donald Trump becomes president for the second time? And if you have forgotten, let's take a look at a brief sketch of the timeline in the US-China Trade War going back to 2018, right, where US unilaterally imposed a lot of tariffs on China, and then China retaliated, and then US retaliated to retaliation, and then it got worse and worse and worse. The trade war was pretty severe, pretty serious, and it created a high level of uncertainty for businessmen in China, businessmen in America, and throughout the world, not just in those two countries, right? The other thing is, if Trump wins again, then I guess Robert Lighthizer, who was his trade policy advisor at the time, is most likely going to come back, and he wanted complete decoupling from China. So according to this article in Foreign Policy, this headline is taken from Foreign Policy, a US academic journal. Trump trade war mastermind, which is Robert Lighthizer, is back with a dangerous new plan. He wants total decoupling from China without thinking through the consequences. So as you have seen under Biden's administration, where he also wanted to do this decoupling nonsense, and there have been a lot of adverse consequences, not just for China, not just for America, but for a lot of other countries. So are we going to see that escalated to a dangerously high level if Trump wins the 2024 presidential election? Just to give you a bit of comfort, despite all these tensions between under Trump and Biden, US and China trade actually hit record level in 2022, despite all the noises. Are we going to, would the US administration, political administration, and the businessmen still be level-headed enough and therefore continue to trade with one another and make sure that global trade doesn't suffer from decoupling or de-risking or whatever you want to call it? Because should that happen, the rest of the world, some parts of the world will benefit, some parts of the world will suffer. Some industries will benefit, some industry would suffer, right? So you got to be careful if you're going to be investing in the stock market in 2024. The thing about the current situation is that you have at the same time very aggressive monetary tightening from EU, from US, particularly United States, because the US monetary tightening has affected the whole world, especially emerging economies and their currencies. So there is already a lot of forecast that the US Central Bank has hit the peak in its tightening, and in 2024 you should see US Federal Reserve cutting interest rate, right? Should that happen, well, the US dollar will weaken. A lot of emerging countries will benefit, their currencies will benefit, including Malaysia, including Indonesia and so on. But who is going to be the president also will determine the pace of easing. Should there be easing in 2024, right? If it is Biden, then you might find that the easing may start sometime in 2024 because he wants to make sure that the stock market, the US stock market doesn't fall. He wants to make sure that the US stock market performs well, and then therefore he wins the re-election. In the case of Trump, he wouldn't want the US Federal Reserve to cut interest rate and therefore benefit Biden. He has already said Trump wants the US stock market to crash in 2024, to his benefit, of course. And then, should he win the US election at the end of this year, then of course he will pressurize the US Federal Reserve to slash interest rate as fast as possible. So what happens to monetary policy, also the US monetary policy also depends on who is the president at the end of 2024. And it also affects the rest of the world, particularly emerging countries like the ASEAN region. And on Indonesia's side, whoever wins would have policy implications, especially foreign policy, right? So in the current presidential campaigning of the three candidates, the maritime issue, like for example the South China Sea, has not been a major campaign issue. The three candidates have not really, in a way, from the way I read it, the three candidates, Prabowo, Anies and Ganjar, are more or less on the same page when it comes to, for example, the South China Sea issue. They are all the three are for talking, negotiating with China, sitting at the table, talking with China on the South China Sea issue, right? Now, having said that, because you have a new foreign minister for Indonesia, The current foreign minister is Retno Marsudi. She served 9 years under Jokowi, and she's achieved a lot. As you can see, Indonesia has emerged as a very important geopolitical leader, especially in the Asia-Pacific region, and relations with US, relations with China have been stable and good. So will the new Indonesian president be able to maintain that very stable, peaceful, neutral foreign policy, a foreign policy that doesn't really choose between US and China? Because what Indonesia's foreign policy would be under the new president is important for ASEAN as a whole. But my take is that from observing the three candidates, I think when they whoever becomes president, I think their relationship with China and US will remain the same. In fact, their relationship with China could even move on to a higher level, to a deeper level. Those of you who know that the Jakarta Bandong high-speed railway was completed recently, and it has been extremely popular. Right? When I was in Jakarta last year, I wanted to take the train just for the experience. Unfortunately, for some reasons I couldn't. But it has been very popular, and a huge majority of Indonesians want this high-speed rail, or they call it Kereta Cepat, to be extended from Bandung to all the way to Surabaya. That would be a game changer, not just for the Indonesian economy, but also for Indonesia-China relationship, and also for the Belt Road Initiative, because this project is under the BRI. So I think whoever becomes Indonesia's president, relations with China will be even more attractive, will be even more close, and relations with US will be as peaceful as it has been. So on that front, I'm not particularly concerned. Right? In fact, I would welcome any closer relationship between Indonesia and China, while at the same time maintaining the friendly relationship that they have with United States. The other thing that is very unique about ASEAN, especially in 2024, I've given you some possibilities where Trump could be president, where trade war could worsen, and if Trump wins, then most likely the Ukrainian crisis will be over, because Putin and Trump are good friends. Trump is not a supporter of NATO, and therefore NATO and the US allies in Western Europe will all fall apart, because Trump will say, look, let's forget it, I'm not going to fight with my good friend Putin. So Ukrainian crisis will be over. But Israel-Palestinian crisis may have a lot more uncertainties. In the case of Biden, the one thing that's clear, the one thing that's positive within quotation mark is that it's a bit more certain. What he's going to do next is a bit more predictable. But with Trump, you can see him from 2016 to 2020. He went all the way and met with the North Korean leader in person. Will he do that if he wins again with the Israel-Palestinian crisis? I don't know. I don't think anybody knows, right? But what we can say is that given the uncertainties for global economy, global trade, ASEAN, if you look at the diagram I have in front of me now, is that comparing, for example, Australian economy is very dependent on China. 40% of Australia's exports go to only China. But in the case of ASEAN, it is very well diversified. It is not dependent on is not overly dependent on a single economy. China about 21%, USA about 19-20%, EU, Japan about 20%. So ASEAN trades with everybody, and the percentage of the trade that ASEAN has, especially exports, is quite well balanced. It's very well diversified. If US goes into recession in 2024, it's okay. China will recover. Europe probably will recover. If there's a worsening of trade war, worsening of relationship between US and China, ASEAN will benefit because the companies from China, the companies from US, from Europe will want to relocate to ASEAN, a region that doesn't want to choose sides. So in this year of election, a lot of elections, major elections, where there are a lot of uncertainties post-election, ASEAN stands out as a region it's a haven. It's a region where you can assume that there'll still be peace, there'll still be prosperity. In fact, if you look at the forecast from S&P, right, for 2024 for the ASEAN region, the brown orangey column is for 2024, the greenish one is 2023, except for Singapore, right, and Indonesia. Every country in the region sees a better GDP in 2024 than 2023. Cambodia, Laos, Malaysia, Philippines, Thailand, Vietnam. And in the case of Indonesia, it's slightly lower than 2023. It's more or less the same, right? The only economy that has a more meaningful drop in 2024 GDP is Singapore. But on the whole, the region, I think is going to do well. In fact, I think S&P's forecast for Indonesia for 2024 is too pessimistic because the president election is going to boost spending, and that will follow through, that will carry through, right? So also I expect China's GDP to recover better in 2024 than 2023, and that will also benefit Indonesia. Especially you can see that key commodity prices have bottomed out. Crude oil, for example, they have really bottomed out. So I think most of the countries in ASEAN will enjoy higher GDP growth, and the region as a whole would enjoy higher GDP growth in a year where there are so many uncertainties arising from so many political elections, right? The other great point about ASEAN is what you can see in front of you, which is something that is unique and underappreciated and overlooked by not only the foreign investors but overlooked by ASEAN's own people. In terms of religion, right, because of Indonesia's size, Indonesia's population is huge. So about 40% of ASEAN's population, which is 600 plus million people, 40% of them are Muslims. And then Buddhists is about 21%, Christians about 21%, and here Confucianism and Taoism is very small, but that's a distortion here, because if you look at under Vietnam, there's a category called none. It's not Muslim, it's not Buddhism, it's not Confucianism, it's none. There's about 90 million there, which is about almost 14% of ASEAN's population. That none is because, Vietnam is still a communist country. But if you go down to Vietnam, you'll find that most of the Vietnamese are either Buddhist or Taoist or Confucianists. So these figures are from CIA, the USCIA. So if you were to adjust, right, the 90 million should go up to either Buddhism or Confucianism and so on. But the key point is this. The key point is that ASEAN is multicultural, multi-religion. And you have so many great religions existing side by side. Do you see any conflict? Do you see any war in ASEAN arising from religion, arising from differences in culture? None. None. We are in Malaysia. When I go to Bangkok, when I go to Jakarta, and so on and so forth, you see all the different races, all the different people with different religious beliefs live very prosperously and peacefully side by side. This is something that ASEAN should be extremely proud of, because you look at other regions in the world, they fight because of religion, they fight because of differences in culture, differences in history. Here, 670 million people. It's a lot of people. If we want to fight, there's a lot of reasons to fight. But we don't. And that is the most precious asset that ASEAN can offer to the rest of the world. So you have 2024, a year of great uncertainties. ASEAN offers good economic prospects, political stability, and peace. Thailand had its election last year, 2023. There's already a political succession peacefully, right? Malaysia, we are already enjoying better political stability. Of course, Vietnam being communist, you don't have this kind of election. And then Indonesia, the next one. I don't think, if you look at up to now, today is already January the 26th, right? It's only about 2-3 weeks away from here, from the voting day. You don't hear reports of violence and so on and so forth. That is remarkable. So, to come back to the question, in 2024, the year of political uncertainty, the year of major elections, is it time for you to buy or sell ASEAN stocks? My answer is simple. Logically, you should be investing in ASEAN stocks, right? I'm focusing on the 6 important stock markets. I've left out Cambodia, Brunei doesn't have, I left out Myanmar, I left out Laos. The other 6, there are about 4,000 overlisted companies, 4,000 plus, right? Which is a lot of, it's actually more than New York Stock Exchange, representing a huge variety of industries, from semiconductor to palm oil to consumer to e-commerce, a huge range. So if you have the time and the skill and experience to do your own research, by all means. But if you are interested to invest in ASEAN stocks, you agree with what my views are, my observations are, but you do not have the time, you do not have the resources, you do not have the skill, don't worry. Capital Dynamics has an ASEAN fund. It's called iCapital ASEAN BTB Fund. It is managed by my Australian company, Capital Dynamics Australia. So if you go to capitaldynamics.com.au and you look for ASEAN Fund, all the details are there. You only need, the minimum investment is 5,000 Australian dollar. It's a retail fund. It's a capital appreciation with some, hopefully some distribution, annual distribution. So you have exposure to ASEAN stocks, the ASEAN economies, but priced in AUD. So you get double protection, right? So for those of you who are interested, go to capitaldynamics.com.au, look for ASEAN Fund, and the details are all there. Or if you're interested and you want some personal attention, you can call our KL office, Kuala Lumpur office, email us, WhatsApp us, or if you're in Singapore, call our Singapore office, or if you're listening to us from Hong Kong, call our Hong Kong office, or if you're in Sydney, call our Sydney office. We're more than happy. Whether you invest 5,000 AUD or 5 million Australian AUD, we're more than happy to handle whatever questions that you may have. So let's look forward to 2024 with great optimism. Share whatever I've said, because I think we are the only one, the only research company, the only fund management company that has looked at 2024 from this particular perspective. Share with your friends and so on, and then don't forget, click like. With that, I thank you again, and we'll see you again next week. Bye bye.